3, 2, 1.
Perfect.
Cool. We've just got breaking news. Up to 3
Oh, really?
households can meet indoors during a 5-day Christmas period between the 23rd and 27th of December. 3
I
households.
saw there was like speculation on that, but is it like official now?
Apparently it's been announced, yeah.
Well, a lot of debates in this house about how we're going to sort out Christmas, so that actually means that we should be fine.
Yeah. That's good. Anyway, should we let's get started.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to mention that or not?
I mean, Gabe can keep this in if he likes. We can do an impromptu.
Yeah, we can just start it from now.
Today we're joined by Katie Powell, who's an old friend of ours from uni. How you doing, Katie?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. And also, obviously, joined by Jack, as always.
How are you? How are you? You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
We always have to do this where we pretend that we haven't already had multiple conversations.
Yeah, we haven't already been speaking for like half an hour.
Having like a yearly catch up.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, weekly catch up. Anyway, this week we're talking about voluntourism and the white saviour complex as our like first topics. I had to quickly look into these terms because I wasn't entirely sure of the like exact definition. So I just quickly Googled it. Voluntourism is obviously, the clues in the name, it's like a mix of volunteering and tourism. So it refers to the act of volunteering abroad, generally in poorly developed communities. And it's got quite a few sort of positive but also negative connotations around it. I was trying to look up like what the positive aspects would be and what the negative ones were. People were saying that positive ones are stuff like there's like the training. It provides training to poor communities in various parts of the world, whether it be in certain construction or like development areas. It provides a cultural exchange and also provides a free workforce to these areas. But the negatives are kind of quite similar. One of them is like unskilled workers, because people go out without necessarily the skills to end up to actually build resources. Like I was reading about how a bunch of Europeans went to some African community and built a well really poorly, and it didn't actually really end up helping the community there at all. Other things like donations that these people get are used to fund the next lot of volunteers the following year. It encourages dependency on Europeans or Americans, whoever is volunteering. It also generally only focuses on short-term solutions. As for white saviour complex, that refers to a white person who provides help to non-white people in a self-serving manner. So, but I think that's quite it's quite vague. I don't know that term to me. I mean, feel free to step in if either of you have got a better definition for it or a better understanding. But to me, white saviour complex seems like quite a negative connotation. And I think it's been used in the media quite a lot in a negative way to describe people who go out to volunteer in other countries but don't necessarily really bring much to these communities. Katie, I know you've you've volunteered in poorer communities in places like Africa. What are your thoughts on these two topics?
I think now generally quite negative. I've done like some research, not extensive, but I will be doing because I'm doing my dissertation on it. But I have done some research into like the positives and negatives of voluntourism, into like case studies. And obviously I've had like first-hand experience of being a volunteer. And like, yeah, I just don't have a very positive view of it.
Right. What were your volunteering experiences? Where did you go and what did you do?
So I went with International Citizen Service, which is a scheme that's funded by DFID, the Department for International Development. And they partner with 8 different charities. So I went with International Service, my charity, and they partner with different charities in developing countries. So the partner organisation that I was working for was Handicap Solidaire Burkina, which is an organisation that helps like fight the stigma around people with disabilities, because for a long time there was a stigma that was like kind of tied to religion, and it was like a punishment for like sinning and from God to be given like a disabled child. And so they went to kind like the organization tries to work against that, and now that's kind of moved on. Well, in the community I was in, that's moved on, and so now they just help with like job opportunities and supporting them, and like carrying on to educate young people so that the stigma doesn't kind of come back, and like they carry on being like integrated well into society from a young age. So what I actually did was work as a communications officer. So I did like blogs, social media, translations, because I was the only one from England that spoke French. And I was in Burkina Faso, so it's a French-speaking country. And yeah, so like I ran all that side of things for the company with my counterpart who was Burkinabe. So like how, sorry, this is a really long explanation, but how it all works is you have an equal number of UK volunteers as you do Burkinabe volunteers, or volunteers from whichever country you go to, and you work in pairs. So whatever you do is one English and one Burkinabe. And like there is like a heavy focus on you, because the whole reason that the government funds this is, one, it like helps them to achieve their DFID goals, so their development goals, and two, it helps to provide better job prospects for the English youth, because this isn't like the most efficient way to use their money at all. There's no doubt about that. Like they could use their money in much more efficient ways by funding programs with skilled workers, people that are already professionals and kind of know what they're doing, and would be much more useful. Because obviously I went out, I was 18 at the time. I'd like just finished my A levels. I had like some life experience, like I traveled a bit and things, but apart from that I don't have much to offer. Like I don't have any real skills that I've honed in over time. And so that's the same for like everybody else I was volunteering with. They were like university graduates that had gone straight from school to uni and then volunteered, or on gap years like I was. So yeah, like the main reason they do the program is just to like boost the job prospects of the young people whilst meeting their goals. And I just like came back basically feeling like it was a waste of time and a waste of money, and yeah.
You felt that straight away after coming back?
I think, yeah, even when I was out there, I remember having conversations with one of like my fellow volunteers about it, and just feeling like frustrated that I couldn't see the change. And they tell you this stuff like, you know, it's they like work towards long-term goals, so you're not going to see change straight away, and like change has happened. And there are a few things that like you read back through old case studies they've done and stuff, and you can see that it has been positive change. But I personally feel that it would be much quicker and it would have happened much more efficiently had they chosen to send, or like to pay locals in the community, or if they had to send international workers, that had skills and had experience, and didn't spend like a month maybe it takes you to like get to grips with what you're doing and get to grips with living there and stuff.
It doesn't feel like the work is being done to properly benefit the community. The work is being done to benefit those that are volunteering to go and do the work.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think that's what it seems to me. I mean, I one of the things that I said to Brett before we started doing the podcast was that I feel incredibly uneducated on this issue, and I actually had quite a visceral reaction to the phrase that was used. So, I mean, completely unwarranted, and because I don't know even nearly enough about the issue. But when Brett said that we'd be talking about, you know, the white saviour complex today, I instantly got my back up and felt sort of defensive without doing any kind of reading on the issue whatsoever. And I think it's important that we you know, face those kinds of preconceived ideas about just a single phrase that we don't know anything about. And a problem that I think I've seen with a lot of charity work, and something that there's an MMA fighter called Justin Wren who started a charity called Fight for the Forgotten. He points this out a lot, is that most larger charities aren't actually set up in a way that like you said, properly benefits the communities. And lots of people ask him how they can get involved in helping directly with what he does, and he says we're not the work that we do is about giving communities, and he works with pygmy communities, and he says it's about giving those communities sustainable help. It's not about us, being there forever. That's not our goal. We want to be there for as short a time as possible, and helping them to live within their means in the ways that they have done traditionally, but just more sustainably. And I think that's maybe one of the things, and where this conversation maybe becomes muddy in a lot of ways, is when it becomes sort of insulting, and there are probably conversations that need to be had that link. Do they link this? Is this linked back to forms of empire, forms of colonialism? I don't know what you think about that, Katie. And I think that's maybe where the conversation can get divisive and misguided, and where what we really need to be doing is having conversations that are focused around really helping communities, and doing what we can to ensure that they can live sustainably within their means, without us going over and thinking we're doing a really good thing and creating a well or whatever in this community that actually doesn't work. So we're not benefiting these communities anyway. We're actually making their situation worse.
Yeah, I think in my reading I've come across things like it's being called voluntourism, being called like modern day colonialism. And another thing I came across was someone saying that the reason that people are so eager to volunteer, and although they have good intentions, it's like powered by guilt. It's like the guilt that you see these, have you heard of poverty porn?
Is this I mentioned this to Brett, the Stacey Dooley image is quite a famous example of this, right? Am I correct there? Yeah. It's children in need and child relief, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so you see this poverty porn, so you see all these African others, because we feel separate from them, we don't feel we can relate to them, and that they're poor and they're helpless and they need a white saviour to go and help them. And that's kind of the whole point of why people feel they should volunteer, and because they have this guilt that we have all of this stuff, we're very much a capitalist society. We have a lot of material goods, and we see there's a general view that our lives in England and in America and other European countries, the places that mostly send volunteers, are better than the lives of those in Africa. And so then we feel guilty for that, and so we were oh well, we now have to go and give them what we've got, or try and help them to gain that. And I think a lot of countries don't want the life that we have, and not everyone wants to live in such a capitalist society and live how our country lives, or how America lives, or how whatever. They have their own structures, and to think that we need to go and give them the Western way of life is can be quite damaging sometimes. I had another point now, I can't remember.
To me, I think that there's a balance between these two things, right? And I completely see where you're coming from, and I can understand how the debate can move in that direction, and it can be construed as, and there probably is an element of that, definitely is an element of that. What I'm hesitant to do is to place the blame at the feet of the people that think they're doing something good. So when we see yourself, for example, who went away and wanted to do something really positive, the last thing I would want is somebody to point the finger at you and say you're using your white guilt to act as a white saviour to take part in modern day colonialism. I think that would be completely wrong, and where the conversation needs to be directed is looking at what we can do to improve and adapt to move forward, and not playing the blame game, because there are a lot of good things that Western charities have done, both at home and abroad. You know, you look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who have provided countless, who have saved millions of lives, providing malaria nets and medication and support for people in Africa. So there is obviously a place for charity. I don't think that, I mean, maybe you'd disagree, but I don't know if the argument is, well, let's stop doing any kind of charity because it's all bad and it's all, you know, sort of modern day colonialism. I don't know if you'd disagree with that, but there is probably a nice middle ground that can be found, and that's where the conversation needs to be directed.
Yeah, I think, I'm not trying to like blame the volunteers at all, because obviously, like, yeah, I've been in that situation, and like I know that I think 99% of volunteers like go with good intent and really do want to make a change and do something good. And like a lot of the volunteer trips, especially from like America, like Christian mission trips, and they're led by faith, and like, yeah, I do think like it's all very good intentions. Like for me, I think the profit made off of it is like can kind of cause issues, I guess. So like the volunteering I went on was with an organization, and I would still say, although I think I shouldn't have gone, and like I think they could have made their money better, I think it was one of the better kinds. I don't know if I'm saying that because I've been and I want to feel better about it, or if like it's because, you know, it's partnered with the government, which makes it seem more credible, and it's run by an actual like non-governmental organization, so a charity. Whereas I know a few people, and I have seen several organizations through my research, which are like for-profit companies, and they charge like £4,000 for 4 weeks in a country, and you'll spend 2 weeks doing some kind of volunteering, and then you spend 2 weeks learning to scuba dive or going hiking or having some kind of holiday aspect. And that's, I think, although I still think what I did was volunteer tourism, I think that's the real like peak of voluntourism, because you are a tourist because you're traveling, but you're also like you're volunteering. And there was one of these in my school when I was in year 11, and I went to one of their talks, and it was like advice they were giving to the children that were going was like, don't tell anyone that you're doing the holiday aspect because they won't want to donate to you, and you have to raise all the money yourself. And you're not going to raise £4,000 to go on a volunteer trip if you're like, oh, but by the way, I'm learning to scuba dive for 2 weeks, and I'm actually only helping for 2 weeks. And like at 16, it's like, how much like can they give? I know it's free labor, but how much can you actually give to a society? And so I think it's those that are like, to me, the core issue, because it's a for-profit business, so they're obviously making money off of this. And so I think not all the time, but a lot of the time, that can mean that like their morals aren't in the right place, because it's just like we're trying to make as much money as we can, you know. And like you're at that age, you're kind of so young that you don't know. Like the only reason I have done my research on this is because I've been, and I wanted to look into it afterwards because I felt it was not like efficient, and because I do international development, it links in with my degree, so I can do that. And yeah, I think like there's just all sorts of problems around for-profit companies running these trips for me.
When I did a quick bit of Googling, the articles I found sort of, you know, explaining these terms and explaining voluntourism, were talking about how important it is to research these organizations before you choose one to go with, because it might, if you are going out there to try and make a change and to volunteer, you might end up going out and not necessarily feeling that way. I've heard of programs that are now sort of trying to focus a bit more on educating people in poorly developed communities, or giving people the resources to make the change themselves, rather than people going and making the changes, if you see what I mean. I think it's something that, was it Comic Relief or Children in Need? Children in Need is the one that's based in the UK about, so Comic Relief. I think Comic Relief came under some fire a few years ago for, you know, amassing all this money and paying for things for things like, you know, malaria medicine and nets against mosquitoes and that kind of thing, but not actually putting the money into the communities and societies out there, or not helping in a long-term way. Is there a shift happening towards that kind of help rather than this voluntourism, do you think?
I hope so. I don't know. I think it's really hard to say.
Yeah.
I can't say I've like looked into.
Would you prefer to see that?
Like the comic relief piece. Yeah, absolutely. Like from my research, I kind of so far I'm at the conclusion that if we can get skilled professionals to volunteer and go on these trips, and for example, doctors, maybe there's a community that like needs training on how to give immunizations that are gonna like stop such a high rate of like infection and of death caused by disease. That I think is excellent. Like if we can get doctors from places that have been trained to go and train people in the community and like have a train the trainer system. So like a doctor trains a doctor from say the UK trains a doctor from a developing community. This doctor then gets taught how to train other doctors, so we don't have like that. No one from the UK has to go back, or once the program is like started and has been successful, that's it. Like they can train each other. And that's the kind of like sustainable voluntourism that you kind of want to see, and I think that's the thing that I think will be really positive. I think going and doing the job for them, when we can employ locals, if there's locals that already know how to do it, we don't need to like send volunteers from the UK or from Europe or from America.
That's collaboration, isn't it? You know, that's what we should be about. That's the good parts of living in a more globalized world, is that we can share resources and work together and have these projects that are rooted in humanity and making the world a better place for everybody, and not, you know, getting a quick buck off of doing 2 weeks of sort of work and then 2 weeks of learning to scuba dive. Like you said, that's probably not the best way of doing things. And unfortunately, and I obviously fallen into the trap. This is two different stories now, and less on this one than what was going on in France that we spoke about on the live show. But there's two stories now where I've read a headline and just sort of fallen into the trap of forming some semblance of an opinion without really knowing what I'm talking about. And I think we all do it, don't we? We all do it. But it's why it's so important, like you say, to listen to people like yourself who have far more of an idea of what they're talking about than I did, and being reasonable in discussions, because this is something that's obviously really important. And I think that most people can agree that we want to work towards creating a better world, whether you believe that, you know, foreign aid should be scrapped or not, which is obviously a big debate that people are having at the moment. I think that most people want to see people living longer, don't want to see people dying of diseases that you essentially can't die of in countries like the UK, and which is why maybe things like you were talking about, the what did you call it, the poverty porn, does work on people, because it does tug at our heartstrings. You know, it does hurt to see people suffering, and people want to help, and it's just about having, you know, proactive conversations that steer things like sustainable development in the right direction, and not put for-profit companies in the position where they're benefiting off of systems that actually aren't working particularly well.
I think it's...
Sorry, go on.
Sorry. Okay, I think it's like having the conversations in the right way as well, because like even when I started my research, I was talking to someone about it, and they were like, well, you did exactly the same thing. And I was like, yeah, but it was different because it was with an NGO. Then I thought about it and I was like, it's not different. Like, I know how I felt when I was there, and I know how I felt when I came back. And like, although it's different because it's not for profit, I fell into the same, like, I did the same things as someone that goes to the company did. You know, I didn't contribute to anything sustainable. I didn't feel like I did. And it was quite hard coming to terms with that and being like, I am also partaking in this, and like if I'm gonna try and educate other people, I need to come to terms with that. And I think having conversations in like a sensitive way, or like educating them before they maybe choose to go with a for-profit company that's like a holiday trip and volunteering in one, and like so that people don't feel attacked, because I think once you feel attacked you shut off and you don't want to know and you don't want to learn, and it takes longer to like come to terms with it, or you never do, because you're like, well, if you're just going to tell me that I've done something wrong, then I don't want to know, you know. Absolutely. So I definitely think like how we educate people is really important.
For sure. I haven't watched Comic Relief at all recently. I remember watching it, like it was, for some reason it was like a tradition every year when I was growing up to watch it because of the, you know, the comedy acts, I guess, or whatever, the skits that they would do. But I remember it making me really uncomfortable seeing those poverty porn adverts with like Ewan McGregor out there for some reason, or, you know, some other big star that's gone out to say, that's got, you know, millions in the bank, but is out there saying you have to donate to help these people, they need you.
That is essentially what it is, isn't it? It's like, look at me, I'm incredible, I'm this film star, look at how awful these people's lives are, please donate. And it's I mean, it's when you put it in those terms, which is essentially, you know, that's essentially what it is, and you don't want to negate the reason that people donate, which is because people want to help, people want to do the right thing, and that's obviously good. Is that you know, it is uncomfortable, and I remember the same thing. It's like not even necessarily watching the show because you felt like it was important to watch it, but you know, somebody might do a funny act, so we'll watch it for entertainment, and then we'll, you know, feel bad and feel like we're learning a bit about these communities, and then we'll all laugh because Ali G interviews, you know, David and Victoria Beckham or whatever it was. That's like the most famous one that I remember. It's not great.
No.
Yeah, it's like, here, feel sad for these people, but now we'll make you laugh so that you don't so that you come back and watch the show.
Yeah. What I want to kind of try and return to the white savior complex term or expression, especially because it made Jack uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that what we've just spoken about, these celebrities going out there and you know, these white faces amongst the, you know, the native people of Africa, you know, showing how much better off they are in those circumstances, and not really there's like a picture of some famous celebrity hugging a child and out there, or coddling someone and reassuring them as they're about to, or they're close to dying from malaria or something. It's do you think seeing those kind of, I don't know if this is maybe a bit too crude, but seeing those kind of images and that kind of imagery and voluntourism and that sort of thing, do you think it promotes, I don't want to say racism because I think that might be a bit too strong, but promotes this inferiority complex or superiority complex?
Yeah, I did some reading into this because I was looking at how social media can perpetuate the white savior complex, and like I think what I found was it reinforces just this idea of like the English white or the European white superior and the poor African other. And like I said earlier, it just reinforces that idea of like helplessness and like we're there to save them. And I found in my reading like another definition of white savior complex. It was phrased as privileged individuals feeding their ego. And I've got a quote here from Muhammad from 2013. And it's, as the gap between rich and poor widens, so too it seems the need for those of the global north to assuage their guilt of their privilege. So I think like they have a point there. Like I think it does widen the gap, and it does make you feel a bit detached, because it's like, oh, you feel so sorry for them, but it's like you're never going to be in that position. And that's the idea, and it kind of reinforces that idea. You see like one of your friends out like, and they're posting a photo with a small black child from Africa, and it's like, oh wow, they're helping someone that's like so poor and like such a sad life and is so inferior. And although you might not realize you're thinking those things, I think it's so ingrained in us from like watching adverts growing up, from watching Comic Relief, from like the fact that, especially for me, like in Devon, it's not diverse. This is a very white community, and I think like we're not exposed to like the positive side of life in developing countries. Like you think of a developing country And I think for most people, the first thing you think of is poverty. The first things you think of is like sick children, Ebola, people dying. And I just think it's so ingrained in our subconscious, we don't even realize that we're doing it. And I think like just continuing continuing volunteerism and continuing the adverts of the celebrities and the poor African children, and continuing to post Instagram pictures where you're like giving these children the best like moment of their day and things like that, just reinforces this narrative, which I think in turn can be quite harmful.
I think I don't know, because even now I'm feeling like I want to push back on some of the stuff that you've both said, but I don't actually know why. And I think it's because I don't want to lay the blame, and I'm not necessarily saying that you're doing this, but I don't want to lay the blame at the feet of the people that believe truly that they're trying to do something good. And I think there are a lot of people, most people that partake in this kind of thing, do genuinely believe that they're making a difference, do want to make a difference, do want to help, and that maybe we're just misguided in our direction. And that's why it maybe because it's quite aggressive language, right? And maybe it's that there for a reason. And I think that there is an element of it reinforcing some deeply ingrained views of developing nations that we have in this country. And like I've said in a lot of these instances, especially when we're talking about race, is that I've had to do a lot of introspection in a lot of my views, or we're speaking about white privilege was something again that I was deeply uncomfortable in accepting was something that impacted me, but through listening and through understanding and not just pushing back and not partaking in the sort of political games is something that I realise is something that exists, and when looking at the true definitions of that and have it taken a nuanced position is something that we should try and understand, and it's probably the same in this instance. What do you think of things like is it gift in a box, Christmas in a box? What was it called? Do you know what I'm talking about? In school, I don't know whether you did this.
Is it like when you buy like goats and stuff on?
No, it was like
and like
we all brought in primary school we did it, and we did it in Love in a Box. That's what it was called. In school, in secondary school we did it, and I actually organised a scheme when I was head boy. I've just remembered this, where we put together gifts in a shoebox for a school. I can't remember where the school was based, but it was I believe it was somewhere in Africa, and we shipped over these boxes, and it was Christmas presents for children that wouldn't have got Christmas presents essentially. Stuff like that. Do you think that falls into the same remit? Because I can tell you that we genuinely believed, and still probably I would argue felt that we were doing something good, and something that was going to benefit people. But again, it makes you look at your own actions, right? And it's good. It's it's important. Do you think that falls into the same category?
Just to comment first on like not blaming people. I think like I'm not obviously trying to blame people that go, but I think like a lot of good intentions are also like mix of ignorance, and not trying to use that as like an offensive word, but just in that we haven't been educated through school and things on these issues. And like I have only come across them in my own reading. I haven't even learned about them through my degree or anything really. But yeah, okay. I've not really thought about, I think it's like the Christmas shoebox appeal or something. They do it as well. Exactly. I don't know if there's different. Yeah, I haven't really thought about that before. I think just like initial thoughts are that I think like there's a cultural difference between obviously every single country, and I don't know what the Christmas culture is in that country, if Christmas is celebrated. I think there's like a lot of things that I obviously haven't looked into because I've not really thought about this. But like, as nice as it is to receive gifts, like when people could buy gifts for me, for like Christmas, I think it's such a tradition in England, and we are like a Christian country, and so obviously we celebrate it here, or the majority of people celebrate it. But like, I don't know if people who are receiving these boxes celebrate Christmas. I don't know if that's their religion. I don't know. I'm just kind of I think it's a nice gesture for sure. And like, yeah, I don't know. I don't see any harm in it really from like just thinking about it. It's definitely something I'd probably quite like to go look into now that you've mentioned it after this podcast. And just read more about. But yeah, I don't see any harm.
I think from my point of view, it's important that we look on each of the cases, sort of, on a case by case basis, and we don't mix everything up in this one, or put everything now into this one box of, that is voluntourism, or these people have a white saviour complex and that's why they're doing it. And whilst important it is to realise that these prejudices do exist, and they do impact our worldview and the things that we do and the way that we look at things, it doesn't mean that we can't do things that are founded through love and common values of humanity and wanting to improve people's lives. And that's, it's difficult. It's a difficult conversation, and it requires, like a lot of the conversations that we end up having on the podcast, a lot of nuance, and it takes a lot of introspection. Sorry, Brett.
I guess, I just wonder if the people who received those gifts were grateful of that or not, because I guess it would take asking the people in those kind of communities, because I wonder if they see it as a one-time thing where it's like, wow, we got these nice little gifts, this is, really nice, we're very grateful, or if it's a case of they get a bunch of these kind of packages throughout the year, and see it more as a sort of, I don't know, they're getting stuff that they don't necessarily need. They are more in need of something else, and it seems to them like they're like these, privileged white Europeans are constantly sending like gifts and stuff, but what they really need is money or food or education or healthcare or whatever the situation is.
I'm almost certain that we received a video from one of the teachers of the students opening the presents, and now you might say that that's poverty porn or something, but it was no. And that was positive, and it was pretty incredible.
I mean, they don't have to send that back, right? So if they do send something like that back, I guess it's probably safe to assume that they were very grateful.
Yeah, and I've seen similar kinds of things, but again, it's we when we're talking about education and healthcare and ending poverty in countries, to what extent can we impact that? And I think that's the important thing when we're talking about sustainable development. And Katie, you'll again know more about this than I will. They're the things that, as a government, you need to be trying to promote and say, we don't just want to send money to charities willy-nilly and hope that they do the right thing, but there are values that we want to promote throughout the world, not through a form of colonizing a country and then enforcing those values on them, but working with countries to ensure that there is good education systems, good healthcare systems, jobs, and etc. And they're the sort of things that we need to be doing in terms of collaboration. Alongside this other stuff, not just donating a section of our GDP to foreign aid and just going, right, there we go, we've done our job, now we're doing good in the world. That's not how we should be doing things, and that's kind of where I sit, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think back to like the shoeboxes as well. I like kind of get where you're coming from, Brett. I think like sometimes it's like, are they gonna use the things we send? But from what I remember, they give you like a list of what to include, what not to include.
Oh, right.
I'm hoping that it's based on like their research, and that they will put on that list things that they like would actually be wanted, but I'm not sure because I haven't looked into it. But I think like I've just been thinking about it while you were speaking. I think the shoebox appeal compared to like voluntourism, I think the shoebox appeal is like selfless. Like you don't gain anything from that apart from feeling good that you've done something that is good and that you've like sent this package. You don't really gain anything. Like it's not something you can put on your CV. It's not going to get you a job. It's not going to you're not going to get like social media followings from it or anything like that.
You're not getting an experience like you would if you were to go abroad.
Yeah, voluntourism, like you do gain something, that there's no doubt about it. Like I didn't necessarily like think that I did anything great, but I've probably got quite a lot of opportunities because of that, because I can demonstrate that I've lived in a completely different community to where I live usually, and like I can demonstrate I've been sensitive to someone else's culture. There's just lots of skills that you gain as a person, and so I think that's where like as well that there's like quite a big difference in those things. Like it's not selfless, and as much as you can try and do it as a selfless act and with good intent, it's never going to be, because you're always going to gain something from it. Unless you never tell anyone you go and don't get on the TV, maybe. I guess then you're not, but...
Acceptable then, if you acknowledge that you're not doing it as a selfless act, you acknowledge that you are partaking in voluntourism, is it then more, would you see that then as being more acceptable? Or would you still think the practice in itself is inherently sort of morally incorrect?
I don't think it's like unacceptable to want to do it. Because like you were saying earlier, like I don't think it's the fault of volunteers, and I do think if people have good intentions. I don't know really. I think if you're like, oh, I'm going to help these people for myself, like good for you for being honest, but you're probably going to get a bit of backlash.
Yeah.
But then like that kind of just ties to like if a different thing that's like no act is ever selfless. I don't know if you've heard that. Like you gain something from everything you do. Yeah.
There's a joke about that in Friends, wasn't there? I think. Anyway,
do you know what? I've never seen Friends.
I know. I can't believe that. It's crazy.
I like binge watched the whole series a couple of years ago, like from start to finish. It was long.
doesn't appeal to me.
No, I've had there's lots of mixed opinions on it now because it's quite outdated, I think.
I still think it's really progressive for a show in the 90s. Anyway, this is really a different conversation. Let's move on to current events. The first event that I wanted to talk about was Boris Johnson announced a 10-point plan last week for a green industrial revolution, which he's apparently putting £12 million into. Billion pounds, sorry. Yeah, million. That's a very small amount. These points, some of these points include investment in offshore wind, hydrogen and nuclear energy, banning the sale of cars and vans with internal combustion engines by 2030, which I think is earlier than they originally promised in their manifesto. Alongside that, there's more incentives to car manufacturers to make electric vehicles and to consumers to buy them. Such as making it cheaper or and so on, and creating grants and that sort of thing for the manufacturers. Investment in charging points, promoting research projects to decarbonize planes and boats, and so on. I know you're both very environmentally conscious, so to me this seems like a pretty good step in the right direction. What are both of your thoughts on that?
It's not good enough, Brett. It's a good start, and it's important that we head in this direction, but it's not good enough. I know we have I say the same thing every time this conversation comes up, and I don't want to, rain on the parade of the government, who seem to be pretty chuffed with themselves that they're starting to do something. The 2050 target isn't good enough. The amount of money isn't good enough. The steps aren't good enough. The incentives for businesses still aren't good enough. The cracking down on oil and gas companies still isn't strong enough. So yes, it is a good step. It is a step in the right direction, and it's good that at least something is being done. It's more than other countries. Not that I think that's, I really don't like that argument when I hear people say, well, why should we do more when other countries aren't? That's not an argument for us not to do the right thing. It is more than some other countries are doing. It's also not as much as a lot of other countries are doing. So we still need to do more, and we need to be pushing for more. And lots of environmental activist organisations and individuals have come out and said that again, it's not enough. we need to be we need, you know, a green industrial revolution would be committing over the next 5 to 10 years to completely change the economy to be green. This isn't a green and environmentally friendly. This isn't that. This is some incentives to try and move the economy in that direction. I still don't see us achieving a lot of these aims with what we're doing at the moment. And that's another thing with a lot of these promises, is that they sound good, they seem good. It sounds like a lot of money. 12 billion quid sounds like a lot of money. It isn't really in the grand scheme of things when we're talking about investment over quite a long period of time as well. The Labour Party, Ed Miliband, who is the Shadow Secretary for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, came out and said a similar sort of thing, that 30 billion was needed over the next, I think he said year and a half. 18 months. So the opposition saying that this isn't enough money. And I don't even see them achieving a lot of these aims, to be perfectly honest with you. I've obviously followed the government's moves to net zero by 2050, and almost everybody that I've spoken to in the renewables sector has said at the moment it doesn't seem like that's anywhere near achievable. So the targets aren't ambitious enough, and the moves to achieve those targets aren't good enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think some step, like any step is better than no step, but it's not good enough. Like, they haven't brought anything in on air travel either, which is like a big thing, and I'm not really sure why there's no movement on that.
It does say that they are promoting research projects to decarbonise planes, but other than that, I don't. But then again,
not a lot, is there?
Yeah, no.
There's no guarantee with that.
No. But then again, there isn't much air travel happening at the moment either, so I don't. So maybe
I think that's. I think that's temporary, but maybe. Yeah. I think the lack of air travel is temporary, but maybe I'm just being optimistic about COVID, so we don't know. But I think. I've lost my train of thought.
So I got another point on air travel. Are you dribbling, Brett?
No.
80% of airplane emissions are produced by 1% of the population. Did you know that?
I saw this recently. This statistic.
Yeah. Crazy.
Is that just recurring businessmen?
Yeah.
Flying about.
Essentially, 1% of the population is involved in 80% of the carbon emissions.
And rich people who can just get about with their private jets.
Absolutely. And what we need to be doing is incentivizing people in a sustainable way to move away from these modes of transport that are so damaging to the environment. Not to mention, all of this stuff is great, right? All of this stuff is great. But if you don't start to tackle the 5 companies that are responsible for a third of all carbon emissions, nothing's going to be done. Absolutely nothing is going to be done. So yeah, it's great. You see BP running these adverts now. We need to achieve a green society. They're still investing far more money into research and development, into new ways of extracting oil and gas to keep raking in massive profits, than they are into moving themselves to being environmentally friendly and sustainable. So until we start seeing those moves and truly incentivizing new companies, new businesses to be able to achieve net zero, then we're not gonna achieve the targets. And I appreciate, Brett, that you want to give them the benefit of the doubt and try and be optimistic. And I do see where you're coming from, and I do see where people are coming from.
What were the what pledges did they make in their manifesto regarding the environment? Is this equal to what they said, or is it?
I think even maybe a little bit more optimistic in some areas. I don't think this is the entirety of their plan. I don't know off the top of my head what they said. This is something that Boris Johnson seemingly cares about, and they do want to do things to be able to move the economy forward in this way. Something else that's weird to me in all of these pledges is that they just, in these plans, they say that this is going to create 10,000 jobs. or 60,000 jobs. Offshore wind, producing enough offshore wind to power every home, quadrupling how much we produce to 40 gigawatts by 2030, supporting up to 60,000 jobs. There's no actual explanation as to where those jobs are going to come from. They just sort of put 60,000 jobs out there as if we all go, okay, great, 60,000 jobs. And yes, these things will create new jobs. Obviously, they will. And it's really important that we move in this direction to create lots of jobs. Where are those jobs going to come from? How are people going to train to be able to achieve those jobs? You can't just, tell somebody to go and produce a wind turbine without any training. There needs to be the right training to be put in place so people can move into this sector. And we need to be looking into investing the types of offshore and onshore renewable energies that are going to be sustainable in the future. So something that we need far more investment in is tidal power. We have the capability in this country to support massive amounts of our energy mix off of tidal power, tidal stream. It's something that we need to put far more money into researching. And I'm not just saying that because it's part of my part-time work and I work in the sector, but it's something that could be really
sure?
So it's something that could be really beneficial to the country, and it gets pittance compared to the subsidies that oil and gas companies get. So it frustrates me. It really does frustrate me when we have these conversations. And whilst yes, I agree, it's a step in the right direction, to me it isn't enough. What do you two think about nuclear power?
I mean, there's not. I think that it's been what's the word? People have got the hang of it. That's what I was going to say. Like people, people know now, I think, how to handle nuclear energy without disasters occurring.
It's incredibly safe.
Exactly. Safe. So I don't see any kind of reason why it shouldn't be used.
I don't know much about it, but I did some research into the green revolution before this, and I read somewhere that it's really expensive. And I don't know. So that's all the information I got, really. But I don't really know enough about it to have an opinion.
Yeah, lots of waste. We already have new nuclear reactors, so Hinkley Point is a good example of this. And we can't achieve net zero if that's our target without some kind of nuclear energy. So I'm not at all an advocate of saying we don't use any nuclear energy. It's the third point of this plan. Advancing nuclear as a clean energy source across large-scale nuclear and developing the next generation of small and advanced reactors. It takes, and this is similar with other areas of renewable energies, but particularly so, and it's not renewable, particularly so in nuclear. In the case of nuclear, the pollution and the carbon emissions that are generated from building a nuclear power site are huge. There is an incredible amount of waste that gets created, and spending vast amounts of money to build new nuclear power sites seems completely counterproductive to me. That money...
Surely any kind of tidal energy project would also involve a lot of
far less
emissions.
Because concrete is incredibly energy intensive to create. And there's vast amounts of concrete that are needed to create a nuclear power plant. Tidal is comparatively, whilst it needs to be a lot of funding for research and development, when you're talking about cost to efficiency, it's far more efficient, far more effective. But it's a far earlier stage of development, so that's the payoff. These things take a lot of investment, but then again, you look at the subsidies that are still going to oil and gas companies and you say, why isn't that money being redirected to emerging renewable energies companies? So positive steps, but a lot more needs to be done. I know I get on my ranty high horse about this issue, but
anyway, let's move on to the next topic then. The next topic is based on an article from Sky. I think I saw a similar one in the BBC as well, that talks about how new research has found 51% of young women and girls experienced harassment over the last summer, which has prompted calls for public sexual harassment to become a criminal offence. The campaign Crime Not Compliment, I believe, was launched yesterday to combat this, to try and make public sexual harassment illegal. Harassment in this sense includes being catcalled, followed, groped, flashed, and upskirted, apparently. Katie, as a person of the female gender, are you shocked at all by these statistics, by these findings? No. Because
I don't think I know a single female that hasn't been harassed in some form.
Yeah, I mean,
and
reading through the article,
have it regularly.
Yeah. I mean, reading through the article, it was shocking to hear about all the. There's other statistics, so I recommend going and having a look at the article. It talks about how parents feel 70 or 80% of parents feel uncomfortable letting their kids go out. Their young girls go out at night, and that sort of thing. But I was still quite shocked when I saw the headline. I don't know about you, Jack, but
I wasn't. To be honest with you, it boggles my mind that this is such a. The thing that shocks me is that this is still such a massive issue, when I feel like it's something that maybe it's just the circles that I'm in. This is something that we're far more aware of, and are able to call out more. But from speaking to female friends and family members, it's not something that shocks me that it still occurs so much. And being in places at university, when you go out, you can see it with your own eyes. And you know, we've spoken about this to some extent on the podcast before. It takes a massive societal shift to be able to change this, and I think we're heading hopefully in the right direction. Street harassment is illegal in plenty of European countries, France, Belgium, and Portugal, in particular. So I have a couple of questions about how I'm totally on board in principle. From a policy point of view, I have a couple of questions, and there's a couple of things that are involved. Well, one in particular that's in the sort of definition of what would be seen as being public sexual harassment. And I'm asking this not from a place of thinking that nothing should change, but from a place of ignorance. Catcalling is included in this. Would you say, Katie, that catcalling is on the same level as, or on the same on the same level as like upskirting and groping and that kind of thing? Would you say that would be something that should be enforced in the same way as those things?
I think obviously it's going to vary from person to person what they think. Like, personally, I think I would say I don't find it as bad, but I still think it should be a punishable offence for sure. Like, I've been catcalled plenty of times and it's horrible. Like, you think, like, when someone says it, and if it's never happened to you, I don't know how you obviously react to it, but I imagine that you're like, they're just saying something, you know, like, why can't you just ignore it? Or I'm not saying that you guys would think this, but it's like when it hasn't happened for a while or you haven't experienced it, you kind of don't realize the effect it has. And it happened to me a few months ago when I was still at uni. It just made me so angry and so upset, and like, you feel so powerless and vulnerable, and like, especially when it's like from a car, because they're about to drive off, like, there's not much you can do in that situation, and yet you feel really vulnerable even though you know that they're about to leave. And it's just like, it made me so mad that someone has the power to take away like my feeling of security and to make me feel like so upset and vulnerable just by shouting something out of a window.
Yeah.
And like, I think it's more like that side of it. I don't know. I think that's the thing that people don't see, which is why they think like it's acceptable to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't really understand what they expect, how they expect us to react either. But like, I just think you don't see that side of it, and people don't really talk about it. Like, how it feels to be catcalled and how it can affect you. And I think if you've had previous experience with maybe what I would describe as more serious harassment, like being groped, or if you'd been assaulted or something like that, like you don't know the impact that's going to have on somebody if you then catcall them.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Sorry, bro. I just completely agree.
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know if it should be illegal. That's the only one where I'm not sure. And I've never been catcalled. I don't know how it feels. I'm sure it feels awful. I could never comment on that. And it makes me angry. You know, I've been with my sister when something's been shouted out the window of a van. I can tell you how angry it makes me. I've been in bars or clubs where friends have been sexually harassed. One pretty nasty case in particular, Brett, I'm sure you remember, in the last year of university, and I, won't go into it, but we weren't particularly happy when it happened.
No.
I could never say how that would make me feel if it happened to me, but I don't know whether it should be illegal. That one specifically, I don't know how you would enforce it. I don't know what punishment you could give to somebody for that. It's awful. It's horrible. As men, I think we should be doing far more to call out other men that are committing these acts, and we need to, say that it's not only women who are sexually harassed. Obviously, it happens to guys as well, but in particular, harassment to men, we need to be far braver in calling out other men that are partaking in these acts. It's not funny. It's not laddie. It's not bantery. If you're out with your mates and one of your friends is, being grotesque, you need to, be brave enough to stick up and say it. And I know it can be difficult, but that's our job, to make these societal changes in saying, that's not right. And I think a lot of it is a case of education. But apart from that, I'm totally on board the fact that these aren't punishable offences. Like upskirting is so disgusting. That is such a disgusting act. How that isn't already illegal, I have no idea. That just completely boggles my mind.
I do think catcalling should be illegal. Because even for the sole reason that if it's made illegal, hopefully that fear of being caught will deter people from doing it. I don't want to sound insensitive, but I actually do have experience of being catcalled by men, because I remember a specific incident in Portsmouth, on that road that HB's on, walking up towards the student union. I was walking up there, and because I've got long hair, I was mistaken for a woman, and a car drove past, honked, and they shouted something like "nice ass" or something at me. And I turned around, and then they realised, but by that point they'd already driven past and gone. And it's that feeling that Katie was saying of, like, even then, I don't have something to fear day to day, from men generally, but I felt really, powerless in that situation, and embarrassed, and worked up about it and angry, but it didn't feel like you could really do anything about it. So
yeah.
So I think sorry, carry on.
No.
Okay. I understand what you're saying, Jack. Like, for sure, I think it would be really, really hard to enforce, and I think there wouldn't be very many cases where someone was penalised for it. I also agree with Brett. Like, I think even if it's just as a deterrent, like, less people are going to do it if it's illegal, because they don't want to get caught.
Yeah.
And if there is a punishment, and yeah.
And in that kind of situation, you can, like, if somebody drives by in a car, you can, like, try and memorize their number plate and then report that, or if
take a photo.
Yeah, or take a photo, or even if there's just police in the street, people are probably less likely to do it if they are wary of the fact that there might be a policeman stood behind them and who sees it. And
still not enforceable though, is it? Even then, I completely see where you're. Excuse me. Completely see where you're both coming from, and agree about the how awful it is of a thing to do. But even then, and just because you can't enforce it, does that mean it shouldn't be illegal? I don't know. Maybe not.
I'm just going to take it to, like, an extreme to put it into, like, better context.
Sure.
There's many rape cases that there's no hard evidence of it, and it's hard to enforce, like, not enforce it, but it's hard to like go to court and to prove that someone's raped you if you're a rape victim. And I think like I wouldn't say that shouldn't be illegal, because it's difficult to like prove that someone's done it, or it's difficult to punish someone for that, because I think it's like, I understand what you're saying, like catcalling, it's like you don't really have, unless you happen to get it on video or something, like there's no proof that it's happened, and like it would be hard to enforce. But I think it's the same with rape. I think like it's not the kind of crime that's like you're going to have hard evidence against the person that's done it to you. It's kind of something that's,
they're still different. Yeah, for sure. But they're different levels of there is vastly different levels of criminality there, isn't there? I mean, we spoke to.
Yeah, I was just taking to the extreme.
Of course. And if you were to make catcalling a crime, would you have to make other forms of street abuse a crime? You know, if somebody goes off at someone in a sweary tirade, would that then qualify as being a crime as well, because of the abuse that entails?
I mean, hate speech is a crime, right?
But what encompasses hate speech?
Well, I mean,
I guess that's the same for catcalling. Like what class is?
Do you see where I'm coming from? And I want to be really careful not to make it seem like I don't think that it's a really heinous thing to do, because I do. I'm not sure about the legality of that specific issue, and not to take away from how important this campaign is, because I think it's a really important campaign. And it's interesting that you mentioned, Brett, and this is probably how open and like widespread this is. But you remember, we dressed up as, and not to trivialize the issue at all, we dressed up as Spice Girls for Halloween one year, and I was in a skirt and a little top and a wig, and I was groped that night. And I wouldn't suggest that I was sexually harassed personally. Not to say that isn't a form of sexual harassment, because it most definitely is. And it's probably because I didn't feel that level of vulnerability, which is obviously a massive part of it. But just how open people are, many people are, to just doing those acts. It's really, really scary, I think. And yeah, I mean, Katie, I don't know if you've, how can we go forward? I mean, this is obviously a step making these things illegal. You obviously feel that, but as a society, to make these things far less prevalent, do you think it's a case of ensuring people are able and supported in speaking out against these things, and any other ways that we can change?
I think it's a mixture of things. So like, I think something you touched on earlier, like calling out your friends, and it's not just guys, like girls too, obviously. Like I've had friends that have made jokes that I'm like, that's just not appropriate, or pointed things out, and it is hard, because sometimes it's like you're kind of seen as like a fun sponge. It's like, oh well, you just don't want to have fun, or like you're just boring, or you're just really cynical, like, and it's really hard to call things out if that is the situation you're in. And at that point I would suggest rethinking those friendships. But like, it is difficult, especially in a group setting, if you're like the odd one out, and there's like, I understand why people don't do it, but I think it's so important in moving forward, because if people you trust and people you care about start telling you that your like behavior is not acceptable, you're going to listen.
Yeah.
Because like, those are the people that you care about, and those are the opinions you care about, and those are the people that shape who you are. And so I think that's like a really important thing. And then just like education, I don't think there's enough education on it in for like young people, because I think if we learned about it younger in life, although it's like definitely a sensitive topic, and it would be something that they would need to collaborate with, I think, sex educators and things like that, to put it into the I think of the word, into the what's it called? Curriculum. Yeah. Because it is so sensitive. Like, I think that would help a lot for future generations growing up. Like, I would hope that would reduce it a lot, because you would just learn about it at a younger age, and it would, I think for me, it would help to empower women and empower anybody that is a victim of harassment, to be like, this is harassment, and to like come to terms with it. Because like, I think another issue is a lot of people will brush it off, and it does affect you. And so easy to be like, I'm fine, and not talk about it because it's a sensitive issue and you don't want to relive it by talking about it and all of the things like that. But I think if we just like talked about it earlier in life, that would all be easier. And if we empower people and tell them like it, and I think part of it is like when it's criminalized, this will become easier because it's like you'll talk about it and you'll have that support to talk about it. And it's I feel like that was really messy, but hopefully you got
not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on to quickfire questions. They're slightly less all over the place this week. I felt like they reached a point where they were just, what was it we had last week? I can't even remember the crazy ones we had last week, but talking about cranes and how they're built and that kind of thing. It's ridiculous.
Do you know how
my first one?
Do you know how a crane's built?
I do not.
Okay, I'm not going to explain it because I've explained it for the past 3 podcasts. But after the podcast, go and research love in a box and how cranes are built. That would be my 2 recommendations.
I feel like we should just open the podcast from now on with a video of the crane being built, just so we don't have to address
it. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I just like
Yeah. It is amazing.
Okay, look at that.
My first question is, in order to further move towards a greener society, what do you think should be the first priority?
Phasing out fossil fuels.
Okay. Katie?
Renewable energy. Or renewable energy.
I think
basically the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess. my answer would be what you mentioned earlier, Jack. The whole holding or imposing some kind of rules against these top 5% of organizations.
5 companies, not even 5%.
5 companies.
That's what I would encompass in phasing out fossil fuels. It's like saying to these. I was gonna go on a sweary tirade then. Saying to these awful companies that you can't continue to destroy the world to make mass profits, and putting in place.
It has to be through policy. That's the thing, because it's not going to happen.
Absolutely,
they're not going to just change their mind.
They're not going to. No, of course not. Because otherwise they would have done it by now. We all know how despicable and disgusting it is. So that would be my first step. Yes, and then using all of that money, all of those funds, and all of those subsidies, and pushing them into other areas, like Katie said.
I agree. My next question is, do you think Scotland will be independent in 10 years?
No.
Nah.
I'm going to say yes, just to be different. I think we're...
10 years.
I think it's looking more and more likely as every year goes by.
I don't think it's dead set that if there was a referendum that Scotland would vote to become independent. And I also don't... Another big factor is, there's 2. One, it's not certain that there's going to be the possibility of there being another referendum anytime soon, especially under this government. And also, they're going to leave the EU. They're going to leave the EU. And rejoining the EU is an incredibly long process that it would be difficult, in my opinion, to see that being fast-tracked for any country, because the EU wants to ensure that it's a difficult thing to join, and there's lots of criteria that have to be met, and although Scotland would meet lots of those, I don't know off the top of my head if they'd meet all of them, so they would be in limbo for a long time. So no, I don't think they will.
My next question is mainstream pornography good or bad for society?
By mainstream, do you mean like Pornhub?
Yes, but
sites like that.
Yeah, but well, kind of the production companies, because Pornhub is basically just a place for all these videos. So
bad.
Okay.
Bad, but I think there's a place for porn. It just needs to be done differently.
I completely agree. But I think
me too.
Different. Sorry, I keep adding nuance to the quickfire questions, and it's not the point of the bloody segment.
Feel free to. It's fine. We're relaxed here at Demographica.
It's production companies and that kind of pornography that's the problem, in my opinion. And
yes,
you mentioned it earlier, Katie. it's empowering those that are involved is what we need to be doing. And I think that there is of course a place for pornography in society, and there should be, but the individuals should be the ones that are empowered. The creators should be the ones that are empowered. Something that's so fantastic about OnlyFans, although I know they've changed some of their rules recently, is that it empowers the content creators. And something that pisses off misogynists is the fact that porn creators or creators of this content are now empowered. It's that we can actually profit in a major way off of you wanting to consume our bodies. And I think that annoys people, and it's definitely the direction that it should be taken in.
Yeah. Oh, she's moving.
It's moving to my charger.
No worries.
About to die.
Sorry, I now can't stop thinking about, you said consume our bodies, and it sounded like cannibalism. Yeah, I think there's tons of educational, positive porn out there. I think that that's normally behind a paywall and doesn't feature on sites like Pornhub. But I think that those should be there should be a transition from mainstream porn to that kind of porn, because I think it encourages safe sex as well as, like I said, educational aspects.
It's as well, isn't it? It's the normalization of those things, and it not all being taboo, and it being open and talked about, and there being support out there for people that are participating in it. And there is so much exploitation in particularly mainstream pornography, and because of the lack of legislation, we don't always have the ability to be able to enforce and stop that. So same for sex workers as well. I mean, that's another industry that's been massively ignored, and there's lots of risk involved in that industry. There just shouldn't be. There just shouldn't be. So yeah, I'd say the same for that industry as well.
Mm-hmm. My final question is from Jack Street, and it's: if you could only drink one drink besides water, tea, and coffee for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Changing the tone from tackling these really important issues. By the way.
Yeah.
A berry oasis, the red one.
Berry oasis.
I don't know what it actually is, but it's the red one. Like, it's like purpley red.
No, I think I know which one you mean.
Right.
Yeah, that would be my choice.
I don't know. You've torn the rug out from under me with this question, because I solely survive on water. Like, it's all I ever drink, and
which is good.
Yes, but
I'd say water is definitely my number one.
Of course, which is why I included it, and tea and coffee, because I wanted to give myself more options, because all I drink is water, tea, coffee, and different kinds of alcohol. And that's why I wanted to give myself more of.
And you can't pick an alcoholic beverage without sounding like an alcoholic.
So I wanted to add coffee and tea. Yeah, but my pick is an alcoholic beverage.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, all I drink.
But you'd have to drink this all day.
No, you silly boy.
You should have water all day.
Water, tea, and coffee. You don't have to. I'm just not going to just be drinking pints all day. You can have water, tea, and coffee.
Oh, but your question is if you could only drink one drink besides water, tea, or coffee.
No, did I put that? Except,
yeah, you did.
Except water, tea, and coffee.
I just did.
No, I put except.
Did you? Oh, maybe. Well, so that means no water, tea, or coffee, right?
No, you can have water, tea, and coffee.
No, as in you pick a drink that's not water, tea, or coffee.
Oh, I thought you were saying if you had to survive on only one drink for the rest of your life.
You would die.
Well, yeah, you would, but
so
I thought that was the question.
You've got water, tea, and coffee. You can pick one more beverage that you're able to drink.
Oh.
Brett Lee, what is that beverage?
That's way more boring of a question.
Do you think that Katie is just going to want to survive on berry oasis for the rest of her life?
Yes, I do.
I would pick water, and then berry oasis, and then orange juice.
So,
I'm set with water, so...
No, you have to pick
I'll add milk.
I'll
add milk.
Milk?
Yeah, because it's the only other beverage
Okay, fair enough. This is what we disagree on most viscerally.
This is the most heated debate of the podcast. It's always these questions.
Mine would be Spitfire Kentish Ale.
I'm
Closely followed.
I'm still just imagining that as your only drink.
Just me. I just live in a Wetherspoons.
Really dehydrated, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
Right, no. With water, tea and coffee in the day.
Okay.
With dinner, some Spitfire. I'm disappointed by your pick, Brett. I'll be honest with you. But alas.
Yeah. I'm gonna stick with it. And okay. On that note, thank you very much for joining us, Katie.
Thank you. It's been really good to have you on and to catch up.
Yeah, it has. It's been very interesting as well.
Yeah,
really interesting topics. Normally, I'd ask if there's anything you want to promote anywhere, but you're not. There? Is there?
No, not at the moment. I don't think so.
I would promote the campaign that we talked about earlier, the Crime Not Compliment campaign. If anybody is remotely interested in trying to agrees with us and wants to try and make that change, I would recommend checking it out and signing the petition that they created yesterday. But yeah, other than that, thank you for listening. Thank you, Katie, again. And, we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.